Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 7, quite a lengthy chapter, so let's get started. Questions about marriage. Now concerning the things about which you wrote to me, it is a good thing for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Let the husband render or give to the wife due affection, and likewise the wife to the husband. So make sure you're affectionate to each other, okay? The wife does not have authority or power over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority or power over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer. Then come together again, so that Satan does not tempt you for your lack of self-control. We see here equality of the man being affectionate to the wife being affectionate to the man, inequality. We see that the man, it should yield his body to the woman when it comes to a sexual nature, and the man and the woman should likewise. Obviously there could be situations such as times of the month, periods when the wife may not fancy doing anything, and the Bible does say that it's unclean to have sexual intercourse when a woman is on her period. So just thought I'd throw that out there. So if your man is telling you to do things and you're in that situation of the monthlies, then you can say no. Also, if you don't feel well, and if you don't feel any and everything else, all these other situations can be brought into it. What we're looking at here is just a no kind of thing. Just a no, and being unreasonable, being unthoughtful, and not considering the other person's needs. And that works both ways. If the woman really wants it and the man, it just can't be bothered, he needs to yield to the woman and so forth. It's a pretty delicate situation, so you have to use some wisdom in there. Now it says the reason you should do this is that the devil doesn't trust you for your lack of self-control. Because if you're depriving one another from sexual intimacy, then the devil will bring someone along to try and take that place. Now, a man or woman should never say, oh, well, I had an affair because my man wasn't providing my needs, or likewise the woman wasn't providing my needs, so therefore it's their fault. It isn't. Because at the end of the day, even if the devil does tempt you, you can say no, you can turn that away, okay? So, but Paul is also aware and does warn us that the devil will come along and try to tempt you for your lack of self-control. From all probability, men nowadays, if a man's not getting any action as it was, or a woman's not getting any action from her partner, they would most likely, first of all, before getting into an affair, would probably turn to pornography, okay? And then it's a procession, a slippery slope from there on, where the person would gradually slip into that, okay? I'm sure they're not going to go out one night when the partner said, I don't want to do anything tonight, and then they hire a prostitute the following night, 5 minutes later. It's going to be a process. Now, it says here in verse 7, for I would that all men were even as I myself. But every man is his own proper gift from God, one after this manner and another after that. See, Paul was single. He wasn't burdened by having to provide services for his wife. He wasn't having the distraction of having to meet the wife's needs and vice versa and so forth. That wasn't an issue to him, and so therefore the devil couldn't tempt him in them areas because that didn't interest him, okay? He decided that he wanted to be single and that he had no interest in a sexual relationship or even marriage. And so he considered himself to be in a good position. I say to the unmarried and widows that it is good for them if they live even as I am. Or I say to the unmarried and widows that it is good for them to live even as I am. In other words, if you're unmarried and if you're a widow, then just stay single. But if they cannot restrain themselves, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. In other words, if you're unmarried, if you're a widow, and you can't control yourself, it's best to get married rather than burn up with sexual desire. Now to the married I command, not I, but the Lord, do not let the wife depart or leave from her husband, but if she departs, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband, and do not let the husband divorce his wife. To the rest I speak, not the Lord. If any brother has an unbelieving wife who consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. And if the woman has an unbelieving husband who consents to live with her, she should not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified or set apart by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified or set apart by the husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but now they are holy. But if the unbeliever departs, let the one depart. A brother or sister is not bound in such cases. God has called us to peace. For how do you know, O wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, a husband, whether you will save your wife? And so we see a situation here that the husband and wife shouldn't depart from each other. And that's what he's saying here. There are obviously situations that we'll see in other parts of the Bible that say if there's fornication, adultery in the situation, then you can depart. Okay, but in general, Paul's trying to say don't just leave each other. You know, there's no reason for you to if there's no reason to leave each other, don't do it, other than adultery. On the other hand, if a person, say like my mother-in-law, she's a Christian and her husband isn't at this time, but he's happy to live with her and she's happy to live with him. He doesn't want to leave her, she doesn't want to leave him, and so this is where Paul says, you don't know, you might get your husband saved, so stay with them. Again, the other way around with the roles reversed as well. If a man is a Christian and he's married to an unbelieving wife, don't leave her, because you might get saved. Now this is in the context of two people who were both non-Christians, such as my mother-in-law and her husband were both non-Christians. Okay, then my mother-in-law got saved, become a Christian, and you know, so that is that dynamic. It's not saying that we should go out and marry an unbeliever, and if they're happy to live with us, because that's twisting. All right, that's twisting the verses and trying to make it look like, oh, I can go out and marry an unbeliever, and if they're happy to live with me, happy days. No, it's talking about two people who were not saved. One gets saved, carry on in that relationship. Okay, there's no need for you or reason for you to split up just because the other person hasn't got saved. And I've seen it a number of times in the church, in churches I've been to, where a person, two people, one person will get saved in the relationship, then they'll go to church, they'll spot someone, their husband's not interested in praying, reading the Bible, nothing, not even spiritual perhaps, and then let's say that the woman goes to church and she's like, oh, my husband don't want to pray, don't want to come to church, and this is going on for a period of time, and she sees some guy that she fancies at church, and then she begins to get these thoughts in her head, oh, maybe God wants me to be with them because they're a Christian and my husband's not a Christian. And then before you know it, she divorces her husband and gets together with this Christian, okay, and then thinks it's right with God. And I speak that from experience because that's what my sister did. My sister was married, got saved, then stayed with her unsaved husband for a while. Then she met some guy at church who was into worship leading. She got a connection with him, and she said, I believe God's telling me to leave my husband, my unsaved husband, to be with this Christian guy because we've got a lot more in common. And I said, no, that's not the case. And she lost the plot with me, and she proceeded to get divorced from her husband and then marry this guy and then think that was right. And then she spoke to me about it, and I said, well, no, just because you've got married to this person, he was wrong in the first place and it's still wrong now. You haven't repented. If you repented, you'd have said, I shouldn't have ditched my husband, I shouldn't have got this person. If anything, I just won't be with anyone. Okay? Or go back to your husband. That's what repentance is. Not, oh, well, I met someone else and I made a mistake. Well, I got married to this new person. I'm fine with God now. No, it's wrong. From the Bible, that's what it says. Verse 17. But as God has given to every man, and as the Lord has called every man, so let him walk. This I command in all churches. Is any man called while being circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised. However that works. I don't think you can stick your foreskin back on, do you? Anyway, so Paul knows. Paul knows, not Paul knows. Paul knows. Is any man called while uncircumcised? Let him not be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing, but the keeping of the commandments of God is everything. Let each man remain in the same condition as he was called. Were you called while a servant? Do not worry about it. But if you may become free, then do so. For he who is called in the Lord while a servant is the Lord's free man. Likewise, he who is called while free is Christ's servant. You were bought at a price. Do not be the servants of men. Brothers, let every man, in whatever condition he is called, remain there with God. Now concerning virgins, I have no command from the Lord, yet I will give you my judgment as one who has obtained mercy from the Lord to be faithful. Excuse me. I suppose therefore that I suppose therefore that this is good because of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Now the present distress that Paul was talking about was the Christians are being persecuted and they're under immense pressure just to live for God, let alone get married and start setting up a family in this period of persecution. So he's saying during this time of distress, it's probably best if you stay single, because if you start getting married and having children, you're going to drag all them into this as well. Verse 27. Are you committed to a wife? Do not seek to be uncommitted. Are you free from a wife? Then do not seek a wife. But if you marry, you have not sinned. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Nevertheless, they will have trouble in this life, but I would spare you that. But this I say, brothers, the time is short. It remains that those who have wives should be as though they had none, those who weep as though they did not weep, those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice, those who buy as though they possess nothing, and those who use this world as though they did not make full use of it, for the form of this world is passing away. So there's a lot of things to do with possessions and other things to do there. During this time of persecution, during this time of distress, don't get settled in this world. Don't get too sort of comfortable in this world with these things going on. Verse 32, but I prefer that you have no concern. He who is unmarried cares for the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he who marries cares for the things of the world, how he may please his wife. There is a difference between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman cares for the things of the Lord, that she may be holy in body and in spirit. But she who is married cares for the things of the world, how she may please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to put restraint upon you, but for what is proper, and that you may serve the Lord without distraction. See, that's the thing here. Paul's not saying, he's not against being married, he's not against you having a partner, wife, husband, etc. in the Lord. But he's just saying that if you're single, you're going to be able to focus 100 on God. And especially during that time, it was even more probably better off if you were single not to get hitched with anyone until that time had passed, or until you moved out of the area perhaps. Okay, so he's saying if you're single, God's got your whole attention. If you're married, your attention's going to be divided. For when it says the things of this world, it's not talking about sinful things, it's talking about the cares of life, the paying the bills and looking after the family, what your wife wants, what she needs, and then you're going to have a divided attention. So when people are married, their attention, even though they may say God is 100 in my life, there will be a certain compromise there in a percentage of they've also got to have their time, and they've got to give their time to me as well, and to God. So there's 3 relationships in that relationship. Being single, you can just focus on God 100. Verse 36, if any man thinks that he is behaving improperly towards his virgin, and if she is past the flower of her youth, in other words, old enough, past her, I guess the flower of her youth would be when she's mature, and not a child. Do you know what I mean? If she's past the flower of her youth, And see, notice it says youth here, it doesn't say child. And so youth, so some people may think that in the Bible people married like children, but they didn't. Okay, they were known as youths. So a youth could be, you know, sort of mid-teens and up, perhaps. Who knows? I'll have to check that out. If any man thinks that he is behaving improperly towards his virgin, and if she is past the flower of her youth, and passions so require, let him do what he will. He does not sin. Let them marry. I think it was said that Mary was somewhere around about 15 when she got married to Joseph, something like that. But what we've got to realise is in the Eastern cultures and in a lot of foreign cultures, they do mature a lot quicker than us in the Western world. They do mature far quicker. And boys who done their bar mitzvah were 13 years old and considered a man. And I know that some 13-year-olds, they have the maturity of a man. They have developed hormonally and all these other areas as men. And to be honest, in the olden days, a 13-year-old boy would have probably started work at the age of 8 anyway, so he'd have been working for 5 years by that time. Nowadays, we see boys who are 13 who are still at school, never worked a day because the culture has changed. Okay, and we see 13-year-olds as children because they play with toys and they you know, they're just barely into high school and stuff. So it is a totally different thing. Things have changed a lot. Yeah. Now let's see where I am. Verse 37. Nevertheless, he who stands steadfast and has power over his own will, and has so decreed in his heart that he will keep his virgin, does well. So then, he who gives her in marriage does well, but he who gives her not in marriage does better. So it's possible for a man like Joseph and Mary. Okay, Joseph was with Mary, but she was a virgin. No problem. Okay, they had a relationship, but it was not a sexual relationship. It would have been a relationship of the soul and of the mind and of the heart, the spirit. The physical relationship was not there until, at least, you know, until after Jesus was born for a start. And then they decided to get married. So some people can have a lifelong partner and just say, I don't want any sexual involvement. I just want you to be my partner. And in that case, you don't need to get married. You only need to get married if you're going to start having sex. Okay? So two Christians can be together. They can, and as long as they're not engaged in sexual activity, they can be in a relationship, a righteous one, without getting married. The wife is bound by the law as long as her husband lives, but if her husband dies, she is at liberty or freedom to be married to whom she will, but only in the Lord. But in my judgment, she is happy if she so remains as she is. And I think that I have the Spirit of God. Pretty long chapter, that one. Quite a lot to go into detail. But I feel that what was coming to me as I was explaining it was important. Some of these chapters, as you know, will be short. Some of them will be longer. But as I said before, the purpose of these Bible studies is not just to read you the text and then just leave it to your own imagination, but to explain the best that I can, okay, according to the knowledge I've gained over the years and my understanding. If you have any disagreements or any contradictive thoughts, then please let me know. And if I'm wrong, I can correct myself, can't I? But anyway, I will see you in the next video. God bless you. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day. In Jesus' name. Bye-bye.